Anyone who's ever owned a boat knows that you're constantly fiddling around with them, maintaining them, adding stuff to them to better increase your fishing fun and enjoyment. One of the great things about a boat is that you can customise it to a certain level to suit your particular needs. Even a really well set up boat like this Fishing World CJ 465, there are little things you can add to it to just make it that little bit better. One of the key things you've got to think about when you start modifying your boat is the tools that you need for the job. And Sammy's just going to run through the basic sort of tools you need for a bit of DIY boat improvement.
So a lot of these projects can be undertaken by most people. They're relatively straightforward, they're not that complex. But it's important before you start to have the necessary tools on hand, and some of the tools include things like hole saws and a cordless drill if you want to drill a hole and put a rod holder through, drill bits for any screw and bolt holes. There are some drill bits there with screwdriver heads in case you're self-tapping into timber, aluminium or fiberglass, a rivet gun and some rivets if you choose to rivet rather than screw or bolt, a marker and a ruler so that you can mark out any items before you actually mount them, pliers, spanners, screwdrivers, very basic toolkit that a lot of people would have at home. Having them laid out and on hand before you start the job will make the job a lot easier.
One of the other important things that you need to think about when you're setting up your toolkit is that with boats that are used in a marine environment, you need to be very, very careful that you use only marine grade stainless steel, nuts, bolts, screws, washers and so forth. If you use just standard old steel stuff, it rusts straight out. So always use stainless stuff. Even if it's a fiberglass boat or an aluminium boat, stainless is the way to go. If you're using stainless steel nuts and bolts into an aluminium boat, you really need to augment that with something like this Duralac. What this stuff does, it inhibits the electronic corrosion between dissimilar metals. If you don't use something like this, what will happen is that the stainless steel and the aluminium will react with each other and cause corrosion. So it's quite important to use something like this. There are various products out there, this stuff's not too bad. So stainless steel, Duralac, and you're set.
And one thing to know before you actually start mounting these things and cutting holes and drilling into your boat is to actually grab the component that you're thinking of fitting. So this is a knife and ply holder, for example, and think through a logical place where you're actually going to mount this. So, would you mount this in a corner that's not accessible, or would you mount it somewhere relatively straightforward, relatively close to the action, like on the side of this console? Now, bear in mind that you generally don't want to drill into the top sides of the hull if you can avoid it, because that is where the water actually laps up against the side of the boat, so you might get water coming through that bolt hole at some point in time and causing you grief. So just be mindful of location. Think through a logical place where you're going to mount them. If we're going to mount rod holders, for example, do we mount them in front of the console or along the side of the console? If they're in front of the console, will they annoy me when I'm driving having to look through rod holders? So think through before you drill or before you cut out any components.
Yeah, and one point to remember there, Sammy, is once you've drilled a hole in a boat, that's
no
it.
Going back.
It's
no going
done.
back.
So you've got to be sure about that. Now look, there's a whole range of stuff out there, guys, that you can look at to put into your boat. Nifty little things like these drink holder. Strategically mount these around the boat. It stops drinks falling over and tipping over, and it just makes life a whole lot easier when you're out there. Things like this knife and ply holder. Every boat, whether it's a tinny like this or a 40-foot game boat, needs something like this mounted up there. Just keeps things nice and ordered. You've got other accessories like these rail mount rod holders. They just go onto the rails there. They're really simple to mount, but again, as Sammy was saying, you've got to think about how you're going to mount these things. Is it going to affect your access to the boat? Just think and plan. And the other thing that's common these days with boats is marine radios. These are probably a little bit more complicated to mount than say a drink holder, but again, the basic principles: think about things. Where are you going to put it? Where is it going to be minimising the wires and all that sort of stuff? These aren't that difficult to mount really, but you've got to maybe spend a bit more time thinking about how you're going to do it. So those sort of options are there as well. Then you've got simple little things like this little compass, which we'll stick in the boat now. You want to think about where that's going to go. A lot of people just say, oh, just whack it in here. If you just stick it in there like that, it's actually going to take up a lot of room here that you might want to use for storage of lures or line spools. So what we might do is mount it up in the back corner here. What do you think, Sammy?
Makes sense.
Makes sense?
That's what I do.
Very simple job. 2 self-tapping screws, a bit of anti-corrosion inhibitor, and we're set.
That's it.
So there you have it, Sammy. You set up with the right tools, you think about where you're going to mount your accessories, you consider that all-important corrosion issue, especially in aluminium boats, and just about anyone can customise their boat to their heart's content.